Hello there and Happy New Year. This is the first episode of 62 Who Knew in 2021. We decided on the first show that we're going to go a little more personal than usual. Yes, there'll be some statistics. Yes, there'll be some facts and figures, but no long-term care insurance today, no reverse mortgages, no Medicare. We're going to go personal today with one of my closest friends, mentors, confidants, one of my favorite people in the world, Mr. Peter Gelbwaks. He's going to be our only guest. And today we're going to talk about essentially why Peter and his wife, his great wife Sharon, who I've known for years, has decided to be one of the first people to take the vaccine. They're getting it at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Peter does everything with statistics. He doesn't make random decisions. So we're going to find out why Peter made that decision and talk a little bit about what's going on with the vaccine. And then also what we want to talk about, because it's something that affected Peter's life greatly and mine and so many of you and so many people around the country, is going 9 months or so, everybody went a little different, without being able to hug one of your children or hug or see one of your grandchildren. Yes, he did, just like we did some drive-by birthday parties, and we waved, and the first 5 months I had some meetings where the kids came over and stood 20 feet away outside. I have 4 grandchildren, but not seeing them, not holding them, that was rough. And I think that's had a very big effect on this country. I think years from now, when COVID is a distant memory, we're still going to be talking about the emotional effects, the fact that there have been more suicides, more depression cases reported through these last 9 months. COVID is playing a very big part of this country, not just financial, but emotionally and intellectually. So before we bring Peter on, because it's always a ball to have him, I want to thank everybody again. Last week, Ms. Diane Daniels, the founder of Medicare Nation, the #1 podcast in the country. No product used for Coke. They don't send me a check. Why am I showing that? The number one podcast in the country on the topic of Medicare was on. We had a great show, 60,000 plus viewers, and it's still growing. So thank you, Diane. And I want to say thank you to all our new viewers and give you just a little bit of a synopsis of what 62 Who Knew is about. If this is your first time, I'm going to make it a quick one and then get right to Mr. Peter Gelbwaks. So what is 62 Who Knew? What is our premise? Our premise is based on when you get to the age of 62 in this country, the odds say that you have more than a 50-50 chance of making it to 90. So what this show is really about is the double-edged sword, if you would, all right, of longer lifespans. Who knew at 62 you still had another 30 years to go? That's half the time that you've actually been on this planet. You still have to go. And most people, in fact, exactly 99% of the people in this great country, can't make it from 62 to 90 without some help. And that's why every week we endeavor to bring on people that can help you get from 62 to 90, 92, 95, and with our guests from the Weitzman Institute and other people in the medical field, that's soon going to be 95, 100, 105. Who knew you still had that long to go? So we do our best to bring on experts in long-term care insurance, in-home care, reverse mortgages of all type, Medicare supplemental policies, in-home care companies. We are brought on companies that specialize in travel cruises for seniors. We are brought on psychologists to talk about bringing people, what happens at 62 years old when you do retire, or 65. You're used to doing something every day. Now suddenly there's no reason to set the alarm clock. Many people have problems with that. We have a lot of fun on the show. What is this, John, our 89th, 90th episode? 89. We obviously started with 0 viewers. We're now always between that 60, 80, maybe even 90,000 viewer per week. So obviously the topic has caught on, and we thank you all for being here. So without further ado, let's bring on just one of my favorite people in the world. It's one of the pleasures of having this show is being able to meet new people and learn from them. But to be able to bring on friends, and especially this man, I don't know if I'd have a TV show if it wasn't for you. I think if I listed all my national connections, if I went back to all their emails, I think it would say, I was told to call you by Peter Gelbwaks. I'm not even sure I could be on the street with a cardboard sign, that says, "We'll work for mortgages." I could be out there on the Florida Turnpike. Who knows if it wasn't for you? But Happy New Year, my friend. This is going to be a good one no matter how it starts. And thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. Happy New Year to you, Mike, and to all of your viewers. And, it's funny that you said that about being on the Turnpike, because you used a statistic that said that if you're 65, you have a 50-50 chance of making it to 90. And you're on your 89th show, and I think you had better than a 50-50 chance of making it to your 90th show. But I'm not sure that I would have stopped if you were on the Turnpike and rolled down my window.
And gave me a mortgage? You wouldn't give me a mortgage? What would you do if you saw a mortgage person on the side of the street? Will work for mortgages. I'd love to see that.
Well, it is my pleasure to be with you, as always, and thank you for having me on. This is an interesting topic that we want to talk about today, and that's why I agreed to do it. Agreed to share some personal story. When I first did get involved in long-term care insurance some many decades ago, it was because of a personal story. It was because I was a caregiver for my mom at the time. It had nothing to do with my business expertise or background or in sales or anything. It had to do strictly as a caregiver for a aging parent. And that went on for much longer than any of us expected. And I was willing at the time, 30 years ago, to begin sharing that story to try and help other people get to a better place in terms of decision-making about whether they wanted to look at long-term care insurance, buy it or not, but at least plan for the long-term care. And I think that's really a good premise for today's show about, what's your plan when it comes to the vaccination and to dealing with COVID, and how do you view it? Because I don't know that there is a right or wrong.
That's right.
And it's a question of willing to share these different items and issues and ideas and see whether or not people agree or disagree. We don't have anybody on the other side today necessarily that's going to, so I'll try and play both sides of this issue as much as possible.
So being having multiple personalities is going to help you in this particular case.
Right, there you go.
Well, you and Sharon, your lovely wife, have an appointment tomorrow at 9 a.m. to get the vaccine. Let's face it, there's a few different groups. There are people going, I'm not getting it, it's all a farce. I don't even want to talk about those people, that's ridiculous. There are people like me, I'm 62. I have certain risk factors, but I've decided I'm going to wait 3 to 6 months to see other people's reaction. And then there are people that are going, I want it as quick as possible. So I'm going to first ask you, what factors were involved in your decision-making process to say, because you're one of the first, non-first responders that I know in life that are getting it. So how did you and Sharon arrive at that decision?
Okay, I don't want to start out by being objectionable with you, but we are in an initial group of over age 65 in Florida, but I'm not one of the first ones. Believe me, there's been tens of thousands of people over the last week that have gotten it besides the first responders.
I didn't know that.
And how do I know that? Because every line that we called starting last Wednesday was filled up we're already maxing out on their appointments. So we are a full week behind some others. Now, does that put us in front of a lot of other people? Yes, it does, because we were lucky enough to be dialing for dollars, so to speak. There we were on the phone, Sharon and I, last week when the lines opened up in Broward County, and we actually made 1,000 dials and redials over one day, and just happened to get lucky enough to get an appointment and be eligible. I don't agree with every single thing that Governor DeSantis does and says, but I do happen to be 100% in agreement with him on this issue about prioritizing seniors, not just because I'm a senior at 74, or that Sharon at 71 with a suppressed immune system should be, put in the front of any line. But I do believe that he's making a lot of sense when he talks about prioritizing the senior group, which, by the way, in Florida is somewhere around 4.2 or 4.3 million people that are living in Florida that are 65 or over. And he decided to go on his own decision making versus the CDC recommendations of 75 and over, using the thinking process of saying that he saw a 73 or 74-year-old at greater risk than a 20-year-old working at a convenience store that may be considered in other cases as a higher priority on the list. So he did that based on a statistic. And the statistic that we all should know is that 82% of the people that are dying in this country, and we have now somewhere in the range of 350,000 people or more, and heading towards 400, unfortunately, 400,000 very quickly. 82% of that group are people that are 65 and over. Mm-hmm. And by comparison to the bulk of people, 99% of the folks that are the younger group, particularly the much younger group, that are hardly impacted in most cases, even though there are examples, and I've heard one in the last hour about an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old that got pretty sick with COVID, and one that was isolated in her home for a month and now has lost all sense of taste for the last 3 months. So we made a decision that began, and I don't want to belabor it, but it began back in February and March, and you mentioned the name, the Weizmann Institute of Science, and yes, I did bring you to those folks who I've been following and part of and involved in a number of different ways over the last 15 years. Brilliant scientists over in Israel, and they converted 60 some odd labs to COVID vaccine labs. So I began the process of listening and interacting with and paying close attention to what they were doing over in Israel with these different various labs, and then also attending and going on Zoom calls with Johns Hopkins and other institutions about their positioning, and then just following this whole line for the last 8, 9, 10 months, like a number of us have done. I don't know that I want to call myself a news junkie, but staying in the loop, so to speak, with the different opinions and different institutions, particularly following the science more than the politics of this. And based on my living a life of minimizing risk, I guess that's one of the reasons that motivated me to become an insurance guy 52 years ago, about how you deal with risk and how do you minimize a risk of this kind. And Marjorie and Julie, our two daughters, are home. If they are watching, or when they watch the recorded version of this, will be laughing, because I brought them up with the whole idea of minimizing risk. How do you minimize risk in this particular situation? I looked at it very personally, and this had no statement about other people making a decision not to follow. It's not a guideline. It's just my opinion. Our decision. You asked me about how did we personally come to this conclusion.
That's right.
And the way we came to it is first listening to all the scientists, listening and reading all the news, and then being a part of the group that paid close attention to the vaccines that were developed, the Pfizer and Moderna, and the other three companies that are in the process of the final stage 3 developments of the vaccine, and deciding very clearly that there was risk in taking the vaccine, but that we felt that the risk was dramatically lower in doing so than not taking it at our age and in Sharon's condition. And what you mentioned earlier when you opened up about the emotional side of it had some factor also, because we do have 8 grandchildren and most of them live locally and our daughters live locally, and the fact that we were deciding to be extremely conservative, more so than anybody else we know probably, in the way we were acting about avoiding the whole issue of possibly catching COVID, put us, even though we have the blessings of a beautiful home environment, that played a percentage, I don't know what percentage exactly, but it certainly played into our decision about not wanting to wait and not cutting it short and saying at the end of 6 months, I can't do it anymore. I know people like yourself and others that just got to a point, we all have a breaking point. We all have this maximum point that we can deal with of toleration. And then, we just decide to go forward. And in my case, we decided not to do that. And we decided to have high hopes for a vaccination sooner than later. It is actually coming to us a little bit sooner than we had hoped even.
Absolutely.
We didn't expect to get it on January 5th. We thought we were going to be in the group in February or March, once the 75 and over group was taken care of. But then when the governor lowered it to 65, we decided to see if we could be part of that group. And we're very fortunate to be able to get that vaccine tomorrow morning. So we measured and compared the risk of taking a vaccine versus not taking one. And we thought that it was a much higher risk for us at our age and in our situation, that if we were to get COVID, that we either wouldn't survive it or that we would be in a long haul group, or that it would be a lot of suffering and the possibilities of the impact of your heart, of your kidneys, of your other systems.
Your lungs especially.
And then we looked at how many people were suffering consequences, even though it is relatively early on, keeping in mind that the people in the trials were done months ago, and there were thousands. There were 40,000 in one, 30,000, 70, 80,000 people that were in the trials from Moderna and Pfizer, with very few having significant side effects, nobody dying, and very small percentage of people having any real significant. We're not allergic, so we weren't worried about needing an EpiPen to help us, even though that's possible.
Right.
We just thought that the risk there was minimal, and we are going to a facility that has those emergency services available. So we looked at all of these factors and said, okay, we're going to go forward with it. And yet we understand why some people, including people that are very close to us, are hesitating to do so. I think there's more than a couple of groups, though. I think there's your group, that's the wait and see group, which is let's wait another 3 months, another 6 months. We'll have 50 million people, 100 million people, 75 million people that will have taken these vaccines and had the second shots. On Johnson & Johnson, they only need one shot. But on Pfizer and Moderna, as you know, needs 2 shots. And the people that are getting the second shots are first now getting those this week for the most part and in the weeks to come. So for some people, it may be a lot smarter to just wait. As opposed to not taking it at all, I could easily accept that from people that have a high or a low tolerance for a vaccine, that have had complications, or that, I'm talking strictly as a non-medical, obviously, a non-medical person. But there are a lot of good reasons why a percentage of the population doesn't go forward with a vaccine, or at least puts it off for 6 months to a year. I'm just hoping and praying that the people that choose not to get it are not the same group that choose to not wear masks, that choose to not socially distance, that choose to not participate in how to lower the risk other than taking a vaccine. And that's the unknown.
And you're bringing up something that's very, very sensitive, because I think you're going into morality as much as you are technology. I mean, I want to wait 3 to 6 months. I actually have friends. I don't agree with them. The whole thing's a farce. It's been blown. It's just like the flu. I don't even want to get into that. But if you're going to make that decision, or even a person like me, to wait 3 to 6 months, I don't go anywhere without a mask. I do eat in a few restaurants, but I eat outside, 6 feet away from people. I'm going to be respectful that this is a real risk. So no, you're not going to make me take a vaccine, but I don't want to force my decision on everybody in Publix. I don't want to force my decision on everybody in the sushi restaurant that I'm sitting 6 feet away from. So yeah, and anytime we depend, God, I hate to say this, but I am going to say it. Anytime we depend on the intelligence and integrity, of the average Joe Blow walking the street, that worries me. It's like the people that say they don't want to give their children vaccinations. I can respect that. I think it's wrong. But when you send those non-vaccinated kids into preschool and kindergarten and other kids get sick before, because of that, that's not right. That's not your American right of choice. You're only supposed to be able to affect you and yours. So you bring up a staggering point of, I hope this group that doesn't do it shows some self-control and some respect for those around them.
Well, again, to just be brutally direct and honest, for the most part, they're not. So we have a large percentage of the population, I don't know that they're non-believers, but that have turned this into a whole political arena, a whole political circus, and it's really unfortunate that mask wearing became a political statement. I mean, I understand that there was confusion in the beginning and that we were told not to wear masks and then we were told to wear masks.
Yep.
And I'm not going to go down that path because we don't want to spend a lot of time doing that. But there was reason for that, good reason. And, now the question just is, you know me for years. So I'm probably more center left than center right. I tend to be socially liberal.
Me too.
I'm that way until you're impacting my life, and that's what you're talking about.
That's exactly right.
So I'm accepting of whatever you want to do for yourself, and however you want to impact your life, because I don't have any better answer. I don't have any more knowledge than someone else. Okay. So the question is, though, is your decision, and this is what you were talking about, Mike, is your decision going to impact my decision on how I live my life? Is your decision going to keep me out of the restaurant or out of Publix or out of taking a road trip or getting on a plane? And unfortunately, the answer to that right now is yes. So in order to deal with that, that was even more so my reason for getting a vaccination than missing my family as I do terribly and as Sharon does terribly. And that I can't depend on other people to do what I consider to be the right thing. So for me to get myself into a more liberal-minded position when it comes to COVID, I feel like we need to get fully vaccinated, take whatever minimal risk there is involved in doing so that we can go back to some form of normalcy on our way to hopefully a full normal 6 months, 9 months, a year from now. None of us know the answer to that. But at least begin the process of getting back to a real visit. Or unlike you, I have not been to a restaurant. I haven't been to Publix. We get our food delivered to our front door. We haven't allowed anybody in our home for the last 10 months, anyone. Mm-hmm. I paid my cleaning lady to stay away and go to someone else's house. I became the cleaning lady, and which is fine because I needed activity anyway. And I'm proving out to be a decent cleaning lady. So
and you look good in that outfit, I'm sure.
But so we decided the sooner we could get the vaccine, from our standpoint, it made more sense. So that maybe we would venture out. I have a new car sitting in my garage that's got a couple 100 miles on it, and it's 9 months old. Mm-hmm. So, we're not really venturing into anything. We do some visits outside, like you said, on our driveway or in our backyard. Fortunately, we have a beautiful backyard, and we can separate by 25 feet from our kids and grandchildren and still be comfortable enough. I'm getting more hoarse these days on my voice from raising my voice every time I'm speaking, either through a mask or 25 or 30 feet away.
Yes.
But I have nothing to complain about. We are very, very, consider ourselves very blessed, consider ourselves very lucky to be in a position that we're in and to be able to make this decision and to have gotten to this point in our lives. And again, I do want to address that a little bit just for a minute or two, and that's the so-called twilight of your life or the last quarter of your life, or however you want to categorize this group, particularly of those of us that are now in our 70s. I lost 6 close people to me this year, and only one of them from what we believe was COVID, because he was never tested. 4 relatives and 2 very close friends, ranging in age from 61 to 91. And in doing so, it's really a stark realization for me. Mm-hmm. It's a real reality check about how fragile life is and how you want to enjoy every minute, and you want to be able to not miss on the building of memories and on the opportunity for us to share with our loved ones and our friends and family. And we had to make that decision. Were we willing to give up this year in order to hopefully get 5, 10, or 15 more years on the other side?
Or a lot more than that, hopefully.
Well, I get a 50-50 chance, according to you, now that I'm in my 70s,
That's
living
right.
90. So maybe that's 16 years, maybe a little bit more. I don't know. But I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a year or 20 years. But we made a decision that we weighed every factor, like what you're talking about, and said, to us, it made sense. We were going to back off from society as much as we needed to stay safe, and then hopefully open up as quickly as we can. And in the process of doing that, we also made some plans about travel, not by plane and by cruise ship, in my case, but by car up to our place in Maggie Valley, North Carolina, and hopefully to our home, if it's not sold, up in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, for a good number of months over the summer.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to get on a cruise ship for a very long time. And I'd love to take.
Would be very upset to hear you say that.
Yeah, I know.
and you might want to interview Julie.
Yeah.
Because she's on every single day talking with every cruise ship owner and their staff and management about what those ships are doing, what those companies are doing to prepare properly for travel, just like the airlines are what they're doing. And their position, it might be an interesting call for you.
Yes, absolutely.
With someone that has that level of expertise because she's on a Zoom call virtually every single day about what's taking place in the cruise industry. And she is starting to see an uptick in people that are now, particularly in the senior group, that are now getting these vaccines this month and next, and planning to travel over the summer and beyond. So I think that would be an interesting show.
No, there's no doubt. Now, I also just learned just a few days ago when my ex-wife, who works in the Veterans Administration, and she's considered frontline, so she got the shot last week. I didn't know this, and I'm almost ashamed to say it, but she had to sign a disclaimer. You said you were well aware of this, that this vaccine is not, quote, fully approved by the FDA, but is approved for emergency situations like what we're in now. Now that's
an EUA, right? It's an emergency use authorization.
That's a little spooky to me. I mean, they're actually saying we're not taking responsibility for what this does. And I'm not trying to all our great listeners, viewers, I'm not trying to scare anybody out of taking the shot. We all have our own opinion. But that's a little spooky when you get a vaccination and you have to sign something that says you're not holding the manufacturer of that vaccination responsible for growing a third eye or something like that.
So, okay. I totally agree. It would be a valid reason why a group of people might decide to wait. Mm-hmm. Spend another 3 months, another 6 months, another 9 months until a full authorization takes place, as opposed to utilizing emergency use. However, if you look at the statistics, not about the non-believers, but if you look at the statistics of how many people are dying per day right now, and we're pushing 4,000 per day, mm-hmm. and how many people are being hospitalized right now, and we're pushing 125,000 people on any given day being in the hospital. And if you looking at areas of the country that are 10, 15, 20, and 25% positivity rates, like South Florida, but even more so LA County, And then you're listening and watching the interviews of the nursing and doctors and medical staff that are so overwhelmed that they're literally breaking down and crying during most of the interviews that are taking place on TV, and it's not for show, because they're just so emotionally and physically drained from, and now they're having to deal with parking lots and using chapels and using gift shops to house patients that are coming in. And you look at that overflow that's taking place, that we don't have anything other than the possible, in my mind, the military involvement, maybe even more so than National Guard, of setting up the ability to service that many people that are getting sick. This is going to be the worst month in the history of the United States for illness and death from a pandemic ever.
Yes, no doubt in my mind about that.
So if you're looking at that and saying, okay, how do we then get 100 million people vaccinated in the next 100 days from when President-elect Biden becomes president on January 20th? And yes, that is going to happen. So that's my one political statement. And his pledge is, or his wish, I don't know if it's a pledge actually, but I know it's a wish, is to get 100 million people vaccinated within the first 100 days. I think the only way that's going to take place
military,
with military involvement.
Has to be.
Setting up getting the nurses. And I know that Governor DeSantis today at his news conference said that he hired 1,000 more nurses to come on board to be giving vaccinations. And yes, we were off to a very rough start the first couple of weeks, but giving them the credit of the fact that the vaccinations first became available just before the Hanukkah, Christmas, and New Year's holidays, and that combination of really not having a national plan to follow, made it a very rough beginning. But now we're starting to see more access, a lot more access happening today, going forward this week, next week, this month, next month. You'll see a lot better results than people standing online or standing out in Lee County for 24 hours and then being rejected because they didn't have an appointment, or all of these stories where we kept dialing and then the website kept shutting down because they got 95,000 people that they were able to book out of the 250,000 people that were calling in all at one time, blowing up the websites or the phone systems of whether it's Cleveland Clinic or Broward Health or whoever, Jackson Memorial. So things are going to get a lot better, a lot faster. And the question then becomes also, if Johnson & Johnson gets approved in the next 30 days, that's a single shot. So that's going to be much more adaptable to the masses. So those of you that are waiting over the next, let's say, 30 to 90 days,
right?
I think you'll see a lot more results, and you'll be able to measure a lot more of how many people are actually affected by this and how many side effects are taking place and how bad are they. And I heard from a friend today that said his doctor friend was fine, his nurse friend was fine, her sister was fine, and somebody else of the four, one of them ended up having an allergic reaction and ending up in the ER. Tomorrow, there will be a emergency rescue squad available. There will be EpiPens there at the site. They are going to do about 500 a day for the next 6 days. They're going to get 3,000 people, vaccinated. So, all those things may be too much of a challenge for people right now, like yourself, and saying, I'm going to sit back and I'll try and be as cautious and as careful as possible. And then maybe in 2 months or 3 months or 6 months, I'll line up for a shot. Hopefully you won't have to be on a long line.
Yeah. And as we discussed before the show, it's such a different decision process for somebody my age, somebody your age. You're barely 10 years older than me. And again, for that 30-year-old married couple who really looks at it and says, the truth of the matter is, we have a 1 out of, we talked about this before, we have a 1 out of 1,000 chance of even getting it. And at our age, probably a 1 out of 1,000,000 or maybe even 5 million chance of dying from it. Why should I get the vaccine? And at that age, I can understand that, but it brings it back to the conversation 15 minutes ago. I'm going to respect your opinion, but please keep your mask on when you're near me. It's a very, it's a very dangerous thing. It just is. And of course, when you said we're going to have more cases, or this is going to be the worst month in our history, it has to be, because I know just in my small universe, I don't have that many friends because I don't like that many people. Let's face it.
Well, thank you then.
Yeah. There's very few of you. But I have a tremendous amount of people, all kidding around aside, that said, look, it's Christmas, it's Hanukkah. I got to see the kids. So people did do traveling knowing it was, more people. What am I trying to say? Land the plane, Michael, like my kids say. Land the plane, Dad. More people got together in the last 2 weeks in this country than they have probably in 9 months. And that's got to have a positive effect. I mean,
it dates back a little bit further than that. It's like the triple play here. It's Thanksgiving.
Oh, that's right.
That they're in the hospital for right now, dying for right now, and getting positive tested right now.
That's right.
Then it's Hanukkah, then it's Christmas, and then it's New Year's. And then it's the traveling for Thanksgiving back and forth, the traveling for Christmas, and the traveling for New Year's. You had somewhere in the range of 10 million people, I believe it was, travel over this Christmas holiday, and 1 million, I think, yesterday were on planes. Mm-hmm. So you fast forward that 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, and you're going to be in the middle to the last 2 weeks of January, and it's going to be very bad news. It's the scariest time right now. If you've been careful up to now, Michael, and your viewers have been careful, I know I'm not a professional telling you this. I know I'm not a medical person, but I can tell you that if you've been careful up to now and you spent the last 9 months or 10 months trying to avoid it, the next month is the most crucial, because there's a ton of people out there. 1 out of every 16 is getting positive results. Now, that doesn't mean 1 out of every 16 is getting sick, but there are residual, and then there's the long haulers that we mentioned before. I was talking to Holly Thomas, who's a manager over at First Atlantic, which is a very good, great home health care agency in Broward County. And I was just on the phone with her today, and she was talking about, they're one of the few home health care agencies that are actually transporting people that have COVID from hospitals to their home. Not every home health care agency will even accept you. Not every hospital will even accept you or treat you.
That's something I want to talk about when you're done.
I don't want to mention names, but she talked about 2 different major hospitals right here in Broward County. One that's not doing any treatment of any kind for COVID, big hospital, and the other one is doing all kinds of treatments. Okay, and she also talked about her 19-year-old daughter. I asked her permission to share this. Her 19-year-old daughter finally talked her into getting a haircut, like a lot of us have been tempted to do, and some of us have avoided. I decided to learn how to cut my own hair for the last 10 months, not doing too bad of a job.
You did pretty good there, yeah.
As long as you can't see the back. The back is the toughest part.
Yeah.
But her 19-year-old daughter went for a haircut and tried to keep herself as safe as possible, and still ended up coming down with COVID. She ended up having to isolate in her home because she had 2 or 3 other kids and herself. And so she kept her in her room for 2 weeks. She went back for a test and was still positive, kept her in the room for another 2 weeks. And now, that was back in June. And now Holly is telling me about how her daughter has lost all of her sense of taste. And for the last 3 months, I believe, she said, 2 or 3 months, you might want to interview Holly about her.
I think Holly's coming on the show soon.
As a caregiver, and she's playing both roles. As a mother at home, taking care of someone that was positive, and how their life changed over that month that they had to isolate their one daughter. And also, even more so, about her experience of visiting major hospitals in Broward County and what kind of responses she's getting and hearing and seeing. It only gets real for you when it happens to you.
Yes.
You become a believer when you're exposed and it gets real close to you or to your family or to your friends. And no, you don't have to pay taxes, okay? unless you get audited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then
If you're a cheater, you're probably going to get away with it because 90-some-odd% of people that don't pay taxes never get caught. Okay.
It's because they have very good Jewish accountants. But go ahead.
You may take that as a joke, but I'm serious.
You're right.
People take an attitude just like, I don't have to buy health insurance, I don't have to buy life insurance because I'm not sick and I don't need it. Well, this is just not one of those situations for us. We can't, at least in our situation, we're not willing to take that risk of saying we'll wait to see if we ever get it. We probably are not going to get it. We have a 90% chance that we're not going to get it. And then we have a 90% chance that we'll survive it if we do get it. We're not willing to take that risk. So that's a decision that each person has to make, and hopefully they'll respect each other in this process, and they'll respect the folks like myself who decide to get it and don't want to be exposed to someone who is walking around. 40% of us are walking around without even realizing or knowing that we are positive COVID spreaders. And that's the super spreader events that are taking place still. The New Year's Eve parties or the beach parties, at least the beach parties are outside. They showed South Beach on the news with all the young people and the New Year's Eve parties that I couldn't relate. I don't understand how someone would be willing during this high-risk period but then again, as long as I'm not exposed to them, I guess I should be willing to accept the fact that the people going there were all willing to live their life that way. And, it's all about tolerance of risk and whether you're willing to minimize risk or not.
Well, you really hit it on the head when you say it becomes a different definition of real when it affects someone you love. I've taken it seriously. I'd say I started taking it serious late March. Mid-March, I wasn't ignoring it, but it was my children forcing me to take it seriously. And then late March, I took it very seriously. But a person in my life, sort of like you, more of a brother than a friend, that I love dearly. I'm not sure, I've mentioned his name on the show before, I'm not sure he wants the world to know he tested positive. He has a very large national client base in his own profession, but he knows who I'm talking about. He's 70 years old. He has diabetes. That's the bad news. The good news is he is in, like you, excellent shape. Doesn't come close to looking at his age, works the treadmill, and he tested positive Tuesday. And when he called me up and I said, hey, how you doing? Because we speak 3 times a day. And like I said, he's more brother than friend. And he said, well, I had a little bit of a fever. I had a cough. He watches his granddaughter every Friday, young granddaughter. It was I didn't want to take a chance, even though I'm breathing fine. So I went and got tested. Wednesday, he was told he was positive. And that's the closest person to me. I've known other people testing positive, but he's most certainly the closest person to me and my children that have tested positive. And I'll tell you, when I got off the phone, it was more real, even though I take it seriously. It was more real than ever. Call him at night to make sure he's breathing okay. Make sure he put the oximeter, I think that's what you call on his finger. What's your oxygen rate? Call him in the morning. How you doing? How's your voice? It's altogether different when it's someone you love. I guess that's true of everything.
I've been contacting my good, close travel friends of many years that have been traveling the world with us every day. Both came down with it. They decided to get together with their family for Christmas out in LA. They all tested negative and got together. And now 8 of them are positive and with symptoms. And they do have symptoms. They are getting better, which is good news after been 8 or 9 days now. So that's good news, but that's pretty close. When my brother passed away in March, though, what hit home to me the most was not being able to attend a funeral, was not being able to properly mourn, not being able to sit Shiva, not being able to be together with my family during the heaviest days of our emotion and our loss, and the detachment that we felt, and the attempt to do so by Zoom just didn't do it.
That's
and
right.
The attempt to do so with masks on, and you wanted to spend the last 10 minutes or so talking about the impact of the emotion, how the emotional side impacts you just as bad, or in some cases worse. We all are going through this COVID burnout, and I get it. But, watching my little youngest granddaughter, I've got 6 granddaughters and 2 grandsons, and the youngest one didn't really want to come on the driveway with a mask on 25 feet away from us to visit. It was worse than not being together. And she was going home crying. And I was crying over that disconnect of someone that's used to being in our house every weekend and interacting with us on every different level that you can imagine, because you do the same.
Mm-hmm.
So from that standpoint, I was like, yeah, I'm in a big hurry, make this go away. And if that means, in my case, vaccinations, then let's move on it, and let's make it happen, and let's support the science behind it. And yes, I'll be signing a form tomorrow, releasing them from liability, and that is a little bit concerning. Even though you may be doing the same with some of your doctors right now.
That's right.
Prior to COVID, that have decided to do away with their professional liability coverage.
Sure. That's right.
And so you go into his office and you're asked whether or not you're willing to sign this form, that you're not going to hold him liable if he screws up or she screws up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a brand new thing, but yeah, it is a little concerning. But again, weighing, measuring who you are, how where you stand on this issue, and then looking at, and that feeling, that draining emotional drain that takes place when you have this. Some folks, I mean, we are extremely blessed. We're truly extremely blessed, because we have, not only do we have our kids and grandchildren living in the community, but they still like us.
Yeah.
They still think, yeah, I didn't do this on purpose, but they still think that I'm cool enough. And here's what the cup they gave me for,
Mm-hmm.
My grandpa thinks I'm awesome.
Yeah.
My grandkids think I'm awesome. I can't tell you, and that is a big sharing of emotion that a lot of people are doing right now when they're giving a thumbs up when they get that shot in their arm. From the seniors that are really yearning for that ability to get back to be with their loved ones.
That's right.
And a lot of them are separated by distance. We're not. We're 5 minutes away from Julie's home and 10 minutes away from Marjorie's. So we're very anxious to get that first and second shot. And I'll be happy to report back to you if you want to share the experience next month. Actually, in 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, depending on whether the shot is Pfizer, it's 3 weeks later. If it's Moderna, it's 4 weeks later. Pfizer then becomes fully in effect, the efficacy of 95% at the end of 4 weeks. Moderna is at the end of 6 weeks. It's 4 weeks to the second shot, and then 2 weeks more to get full efficacy. And then the over age 65 group is a little bit lower efficacy than the Pfizer, but regardless of which one it is that they're using, in 4 to 6 weeks from now, we're going to be in a different place. And hopefully the only thing we'll get is a notice from my body saying, hey, your immune system is working. You got a sore arm, you got a little bit of a fever, you got a little cold for 24 or 36 hours, which is what they're telling you to expect.
Right.
And then we'll move on.
So you don't know which one you're getting until you actually get there? Is that the norm?
No, that's not the norm. We were told one, and then we were told the other. So the date we were given for the second shot is 3 weeks. And I was trying to verify then. I said, if it's 3 weeks, then it's not Moderna, then it's Pfizer.
Right.
So we don't know. We think it's Pfizer just because the second date we've been given already, and that's 3 weeks out. But we were told in writing at first and on a conference call that it was Moderna. So somebody made a mistake there. And I'm not sure, but regardless, we're going. But we'll find out tomorrow in 12 hours or whatever, or 14 hours.
I'd like to bring on a psychologist. We've brought on some authors and some psychologists to talk about what caregiving does, because there's that chilling statistic of caregivers predeceasing the people they care for. But there has got, we all know there's only about 6 minutes left, so we're okay on time. This is our last topic. We all know that cases of depression are up in the last 9 months. Cases of suicide are up. We are blessed, you and I. My children and grandchildren are also all in the neighborhood. There's so many grandparents out there, God bless them, I respect them, that only see their grandchildren a few times a year or holidays or this. And I'm not saying it hurts them less to go from 3-4 times a year to 0. Well, yeah, I am saying it. It hurts them less than people like us that see them 3-4 times a week to 0. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just
I think it's a different. They've just become more accepting of the reality that they're only going to see those kids once or twice or 3 times a year. But I don't think that they're hurting any less. They may be hurting even more because their fear is, will I ever see them again?
That's true.
And maybe they hadn't seen them in a year, and that's why they were giving in to even though they didn't want to give in, why they allowed them to travel, or why they traveled to them over the holidays, because they just couldn't deal with that idea. But you do have 2 issues, and I know we only have 5 minutes left. Okay. One is, what is the impact going to be on the long-term care community? Forget about insurance, but what is the senior community? How are they going to be impacted on a long-range basis? How many more of them will become people that need long-term care services being provided because they survived, but their heart didn't do well, or their lungs didn't do well, or their kidneys didn't do well, and they're not getting better. I think that is one big issue. And the other one that you're addressing without my help, and that's fine, and that is all the psychological needs that are going to be taking place over the years to come from the trauma that we're all experiencing, some more than others. How about being in a 1-bedroom apartment for 9 months or 10 months by yourself, in a city that has an outbreak?
No, Stephen Sless, who you've met via Zoom, one of my favorite people in the world, a national reverse mortgage person. He's on the show constantly, told us about his dad living in a small apartment, doing well, but being alone this last 8-9 months has brought him emotionally down. And Stephen's not sure if he's going to make a comeback from this past 9 months. What was keeping him going was people around him, was the constant love, the hugs. I know a few weeks ago, my older daughter called and said, we're going with 2 of my 4 grandchildren to Lowry Park Zoo. And of course, that's all outside. And I said, well, that would be cool. And she said, the zoo has like 50% capacity and you have to wear your masks. You don't have to wear them outside, but if you go inside, the tiger, habitat, masks are mandatory for children and everything. So I went. It was about a 60-degree day. And I got to tell you, spending 4 hours at the zoo with 2 of my 4 grandchildren and my older daughter, that was about the best I have felt in 9 months. And I don't get down. I don't sit around going, oh, poor me. I have the same personality you do. But just to be with them and to hold the baby and that, God, I miss that. And I don't do it often.
Let's finish on a high note.
All right. How's this? Oh, not that kind of note. I'm sorry.
So what are the good things that are happening in 2021? The real estate market is, at least in a good part of America, if you're a seller of real estate, particularly of private homes, you're a happy person right now if you're in that marketplace, particularly in the super luxury homes and also in the $300,000 to $500,000 market.
Exactly.
You're going to be pretty happy. If you're out borrowing money in your business, people are lowest interest rates. And how long?
30 years. We're in the 2s. I'm giving fixed rate people in the 2s.
30 years.
That's mbanner at pmanow.com. mbanner at pmanow.com. Lowest fixed rates in 30 years.
And the fact that we have regardless of when you're going to take it or if you're going to take it, the fact that we do have vaccinations that are working right now, 2 already going and 2 to 3 more possibly in the next 60 to 90 days that'll be available in America, our lives should change dramatically over the next 6 months.
Yes.
And those things are all very positive, and I hope that we'll be able to come back and talk about things on a much different level sooner than later, and 2021 being a great change for all of us. And I do appreciate you having me on today to share the stories and opinions, and I hope that I didn't insult anybody in the process. I'm not telling anybody what to do or how to do it.
Absolutely.
But I do appreciate being here tonight.
Well, I always appreciate you being here. I appreciate talking to you, being with, my God, I haven't given you a hug in 9 months. What, has it been, 12 years since we haven't seen each other? In 9 months, it really and truly.
Yeah.
And spending time with you and your unbelievable family is one of my joys in life. Well, we are starting out 2021 in a great way. We got to have a healing year. And I mean healing, not just with COVID-19, but on a social level, a political level. It's time for a little healing and a little warmth in this country. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. Let's just do a little more caring about people. I think we did rise to the occasion. A lot of people that I know that don't like wearing masks wear them anyway. They grumble, but I think America came through this one better than most would have thought. Lot of people put others before themselves. Thank you for being here. It's going to be a great few months. We have some fantastic guests coming. Everybody have a happy and healthy New Year.
Bye.